Hi folks, today I'm going to be talking about going beyond the page load and basically how to utilize New Relic Browser to extend the instrumentation that you have available to you. Before I dive into that, a little bit about me. My name is Richard Moore. I'm a technical account manager at New Relic. So I'm very lucky to be able to work with companies all over the globe on basically getting up and running with New Relic. If you want to, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can go and find me on Twitter. I don't really tweet that much. I've got a fairly boring life on Twitter. I'm also joined today by Killian O'Shea and Chris Wainforth, who are also from New Relic. And after this talk and at the end of the night, we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have as well. So jumping in, just out of interest, how many people here actually are aware of New Relic or have heard of them? Cool, okay, that's pretty good, okay. Good to hear. So today I'm not going to be giving you a sales pitch. I'm actually going to show you some cool stuff that we can do in New Relic. And specifically, we're going to focus on two key things. I'm going to focus basically on looking at our browser product and how we can use that to inline with insights to basically gain more than just the page load and DOM content loaded metrics. So first of all, it's probably important to have a good understanding of what we currently do and why we do that, and actually why is that important. So what we actually do when we're working with our browser product at the moment is we connect into the Performance Navigation API. We happen to also use the Resource Timing API and various things under the hood of the browser agent. And what we're actually doing is we're actually timing all of the segments that are going to the delivery of your web pages. So specifically, we're looking at, for example, the ability to give you the DOM processing time, the time you spent in page rendering. And at the end of each of these events, you're going to typically have DOM content loaded happening at the end of your DOM processing, and you're also going to have the page load event firing after your page is basically loaded. These are two pretty much industry standard metrics that you will probably be aware of in the delivery of web pages. However, obviously there is a lot of other metrics out there that you can go after. So I don't want to give you the idea that obviously these aren't important metrics, because these certainly are important. When it comes to your applications going out into production and utilizing those, if you're working with a large organization where you have an operations team, or maybe you're in a DevOps culture, you'll be responsible for your application. So when you see the DOM processing phase increasing within your applications, this is a good indicator to be able to track how long the DOM processing is taking on your web pages, and also the ability to track that DOM content loaded. So immediately after that, you've got DOM interactive, where users are actually able to scroll and interact with your application. Next, we've also got the page rendering. So after the document object model has been rendered on your page, you're going to have all of the assets that are loading after the DOM content loaded event, and you'll also be able to look into the performance of those. So obviously these are two key events. So they are very useful to us. We can take action when we see a deviation on the performance of these. You can find out obviously where you're spending the time on your applications based off these. They're industry standard. Google Analytics provide these, New Relic provides these, all of our competitors provide these two types of events. And also, when you're actually looking at these, you'll actually be able to analyze where you're actually spending the time and what's deviated within your application, if you suddenly see an increase in your DOM processing time, etc. So let's actually have a look at the Performance Navigation API actually in the real world. So I'm not actually going to dive into New Relic yet. I'm going to dive into New Relic and show you that at the end of this segment of slides. What I want to show you is typically what we're seeing here. So I happen to have a sample site here that we use at New Relic to demonstrate our software, and this is our Acme Telco site. So what I did was I opened up the profiler, the developer tools. Unfortunately for Google, Alex has left, unfortunately, so I won't offend him with the Mozilla side of things. So what we're able to see in my tool is this fairly fast site. It's the DOM content loaded occurred at 759 milliseconds. The page load occurred at 1.87 seconds. And if we actually look at the developer tools here, this is actually what that journey looked like. So I can see in this case that my DOM content loaded occurred here. You can see that occurred around 759 milliseconds. And then we've got our page load event there occurring here around whatever it was, 1.87 seconds. Obviously those are useful information, but what if we wanted to actually go further than this? So what we can actually do is we can look for events that may be more relevant to us. I don't know if you have maybe a business team that are behind your applications and your projects. They're asking you obviously for KPIs that you need to deliver for your applications, or always on your back to try and improve performance, etc. There's a lot of different metrics that we can actually get. Typically, obviously, there's the page load. Something we saw in the timeline back there was actually that the actual page had pretty much rendered before the DOM content loaded event had actually fired. And we'd also seen that the page load, the content was pretty much there on the screen. So this comes back to really that the event that we should really be going after is actually something called perceived load time, not actually the page load time as a metric. So if we look at that timeline here as well, what we can actually see is that technically our perceived load time, where our user actually believed that web page was actually interactive or deliverable, irrespective of it being actually interactive, because after DOM interactive is fired, then they'll be able to interact with the page. We can actually see that this page was very fast in the rendering of this, and we're seeing actually that content was being shown at this point. Obviously, when you're trying to come up with a perceived load time metric to be able to give back to the business or those that are interested, or you're just trying to improve your site, you know, these are not a one-size-fits-all for every single website. They're all problematic metrics. Before I jump into this, there is a metric that synthetically people always go after. I get it asked loads of times, and it's the first meaningful paint candidate. So I get to work with customers all around the world, and I get to see certain accounts where this is relevant, certain accounts where this is not relevant. Happens to be on this telco site. First meaningful paint candidate is not relevant, so it fired at this point. There's nothing on the page. It's not actually meaningful. So obviously this will vary depending on different websites, and obviously if you're working upon multiple websites. But as I said before, these are problematic metrics, and there is no one way to do this. So what we can do with New Relic is obviously out of the box you're going to get the DOM content loaded, you're going to get the DOM processing time, you're going to get the page load, you're going to get loads of rich features that are available just in the standard product. But if we want to take this a step further, what we can actually do is we can utilize the user timing API alongside the New Relic Browser API to actually extend the performance of your site. So the New Relic Browser API, if you head over to this site, docs.newrelic.com, what you're going to be presented with is obviously all of our documentation for the vast variety of products that we have. But specifically, if you choose browser, you'll be able to find our browser agent and SPA API. And this is going to basically provide you a whole host of different things you can do. So there is tons of use cases as what you could do with this. As an example, you can use a page action to send data into our Insights product, which will allow you to query that. You might want to do that if you have an e-commerce application and you want to store the basket data into Insights to query in a dashboard or do interesting things. Today, I'm only going to focus actually on two items here. We're going to look at adding to a trace, and we're also going to look at the set custom attribute value to basically augment the data that we have. So what we have here is a sample application that a guy called Clay Smith, who's a developer advocate at New Relic, has generated. And with this, we're basically tying into that user timing API. And what we have is a customized JavaScript snippet here that gets appended to the existing snippet that is injected into the site. And what we're doing here is that we're tying in and listening for the window.performance events to occur. And with that, we're then calling out to our API points or API methods to augment the data that's being collected. So in this case, we're confirming whether the browser that has that JavaScript snippet in it actually supports the functionality. Otherwise, we'll just return with not supported. And then in this case, we'll go and add and extend the trace here using this. We'll also start adding extra timing points. So obviously with this instrumentation that is fairly minimal considering what we've got there. We can actually add a whole load of features. So given this is our site, what would be some interesting measurement points that we could go after? Well, firstly, we could look at perhaps this logo. Maybe we care about when this logo appears. We could look at the navigation items. Maybe that navigation bar, we'd want to know when that navigation bar appears. One key metric that I mentioned is hero images. This happens to be a very good indicator for when perceived load time is there for your users. We can tie in to get that metric. You could also be looking at time to text, so how long did it take this text to appear. Another metric that's cut off slightly here is DOM interactive, fairly quite simplistic metric to get. This, as I mentioned before, some of these metrics, they're not going to be perfect for every single site. Sites are different. Certain sites you'll have to have a customized approach, and you'll want to analyze obviously what is that best approach for each site. So Netflix actually use this as their measurement, and obviously the idea here is test it first. We could look at key resources on the page, whether they're being blocked by JavaScript and so on. You could measure those. Another key metric that I see is people are very interested in above the fold. One of the issues with above the fold is it's got to be defined by a developer. Another one that Facebook use is also time to first interact. So when did your user start clicking or scrolling, etc. in that application? Time for a plug. So if you want to trial any of these features or so on, or want access to these, you can head over to newrelic.com and you can download and utilize this product for 2 weeks free of charge, and obviously gain full access to everything that we've been through today. And that concludes my short presentation.